All right, welcome back, Left Reckoners. I'm Matt Leck. With me, as always, David Griscom. Hello, David.
Hey, brother, how you doing?
I'm doing very well. I'm pleased to be joined from Las Vegas, Summer Hart and Xander Corvus, adult film stars, and also do work with SWAID, Sex Workers Mutual Aid Fund in Las Vegas. Summer and Xander, thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
Thanks for having us.
So before we get into sort of broader labor issues and things like that, I'm just curious about your stories, and either one of you feel free to start. Like getting political, I imagine it's probably easy to go through entertainment careers without getting political. It's probably maybe some sort of
Probably helpful, yeah.
yeah. So I'm just curious, what has sort of brought this out of you guys?
I mean, I would say this isn't my only career I've ever had, but I would tell you that I've had a lot of social work and like community organization background where I've worked with a lot of people who I noticed maybe were not having the problems that people decided they were having. Like maybe they weren't having mental health problems, but they actually have problems of poverty. And that like the biggest issue that a lot of people seemed to face when we were trying to give them services was actually that they just lacked the funds to be able to do what they needed and get what they needed, like childcare or appropriate health care. And so like we use these approaches really frequently where we're going to, I don't know, help people, but we're not going to help them in a way that's actually beneficial to them. So like what most people need is like to get a service or have money in their pocket or have something done for them. But there's all of these organizations. Like, I mean, I'll give you a really good example of this. Is like there's all of these organizations, and they're nonprofits too, that are like, oh, well, your problem is you don't know how to budget. And it's like, that's not the people's problem. People's problem is that they're being exploited. They make very little money, and then they have to try to make all of that work. And then we make these organizations, create these organizations to help them, where we tell them that they just don't know what they're doing. And I'm telling you right now, poor people are the most resourceful people. They could tell you how to do things that people who have money would not even fathom how to do. And then, of course,
I would say the same thing about, I'm an addict, and I would say the same thing about addicts.
Yes.
Like, addicts are the most resourceful people.
Yes.
And they often don't have a lot of money. So that's,
Yeah, and I worked in a rehab. Like I worked all these different places that are like social service sectors, right? And this was like my common experience. Like the person who I was sitting with often didn't struggle with like a mental health problem or addiction or whatever, so much as they struggled with like poverty and the issue of poverty that made them very sick.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't. I was just gonna say, it didn't occur to me in preparation for this that the sort of paternalism, both in pornography as a genre of entertainment and how we deal with major societal problems that somehow don't seem to actually get addressed. I mean, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
Xander, how about you? How and specifically, just for our sakes, how did you come to find the sort of Left is Best Michael Brooks show universe?
Well, it was through the Majority Report first. I started watching that with, back when Michael was on there and Jamie and y'all and the whole thing. And I got really into that. Really, it was just because I think I started getting sent videos of like Ben Shapiro and stuff like that by one of my friends who have actually converted back since then, which is pretty
Love
awesome.
to hear it.
I spoke about that. Yeah, and he went down a pretty crazy path for a minute there, but he was sending me a lot of these like facts and logic destroyed fucking videos, and back then I was like, yeah, like haha, like whatever, that's funny, but I always held these beliefs in my mind. Like I'll remember, God, when I was like 10, when Obama was in office. No, God, 10? That's not correct. When was Obama elected? 2008.
2008, yeah.
2008.
I can tell you it was the first presidential election I voted in. So
Yeah,
I
me
was
too.
shocked. I was shocked he said 10, but
Not 10. But yeah, so I remember right before Obama, when Obama was running, and I had said to my grandma something about, and my mom's side of the family is hyper right wing, and so I had said to them about, they were talking about Medicare stuff, and I was like, yeah, I don't see any issue with like taxes going to like helping people who can't afford healthcare. Like that's so messed up that wouldn't be a thing. And like she went on this fucking crazy tirade about me being. She was like, "You want to live in Soviet Russia? Like, is that what you want?" And I was like, now as like an adult, I'm like, yeah, comrade, I am a fucking communist. Okay? Like, fuck you. Like, yeah, grandma, look what you made me. So I've always had those kind of beliefs in the background. I didn't really know what they were. And like, hats off to grandma for telling me, what my beliefs were, I guess. But that was, when I discovered like listening to y'all and listening to Michael and Jamie and Sam and all you guys, I found out that I was a leftist because I didn't know what my beliefs were. It was the same as, when I started working for kink.com, I didn't know shit about LGBT anything. I was, grew up as a fucking bone-ass poor kid in Ohio. And, Ohio in the 90s was not quite the most, liberal in that sense, I guess. Yeah. But that was when I discovered all the things I now know about the LGBT community and all that. So really my journey was sculpted more in the right direction from TMBS and the Majority Report. Like that was what got me to finally like start getting involved in actually understanding, the politics of what I believe in inside myself, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I want to circle back to the kink.com stuff kind of in the latter half of the interview because that is very interesting. Yeah. For me, I must say it's quite an experience. Xander called into Majority Report. I must have been like this fall and putting the two together because I'd seen sort of like Comrade Corvus on Twitter and I'm familiar with the work on Brazzers, but I never really put the two connections together. And then I'm like, oh, wait a second, that's the same guy. And I mean, it was very mind blowing. And I mean, I'll just say it's nice to hear people and like any of these stories, honestly, like where people, I mean, that Obama moment is so interesting because I think like that paranoia that people have, like this is a moment of socialism. Mm-hmm. Of course, we all know that Obama wasn't like actually a secret socialist, but that's what our generation, like that did like sort of give us a sort of off ramp into, but wait a second, like, right. Like people shouldn't be going broke for healthcare and being in medical debt. If that makes me a socialist or communist, so be it. And you do have comrades. So I just want to ask, like, ideologically, Xander, you consider yourself a communist?
I would, yes.
Cool.
Yeah, I don't have any qualms about saying that. Yeah, I mean, but that's the idea, right? The idea is, the socialism, communism, anarchism is like it leads to, right? Like we don't live in a world right now where communism as a broad thing could even be possible. It's more like a thing that I would love to see in the future, like the Star Trek. Star Trek is the best example you can really give anyone. Is like, that's what we could have. We could have that or Mad Max. You know what I mean? We're leaning toward Mad Max, but yeah, I think that's basically where my mind has always been.
No, I appreciate it. I think that we're the first generation. I think because of that Obama, we're the first generation to sort of like look at these things beyond a sort of Cold War a context and say like, imperialism is bad, and there's lots of things to be critical about of all sorts of like major nation world powers. But yeah, I appreciated that. So let's move on to another.
Go ahead. No, I think a lot of that does have to do with the internet, though, because back before the internet, back before like mass communication, our parents just learned, evil communists and socialists and. What was the John Birch Society?
Yeah, the John Birch Society. Yeah.
You ever hear that Bob Dylan song about that? It's amazing.
It's a great song. Yeah,
such a great song.
My favorite Dylan. Yeah,
that's me too. But that's that and the Hurricane. But the whole that's what they were taught. That's what our grandparents were taught, and you weren't able to question that because you didn't have any counter narratives to like there wasn't any real books available or anything like that for you to like look at about this kind of thing. I mean, and then you had, people say what they say now about Chomsky because he's kind of like doing the thing, but like, you had Chomsky and Michael Parenti and all these guys from back then who were actually coming out and saying shit, but it was
Mm-hmm.
that shit was so hard to find. It was only because of
Yeah.
YouTube that I've ever seen a fucking Michael Parenti lecture, like, you know. So it was,
And I think
without the
we're-
internet, we wouldn't have gotten that.
Yeah, and we're of the age that we
Thanks,
saw
Michael.
that transit. Like we experienced it both ways of having things very like remember watching TV Guide. Here's what's coming up on C-SPAN. Maybe you can get like an interesting guy on Book TV or something.
Yeah.
Now you can just Google or YouTube all that stuff.
I mean,
Yeah.
it was here like my Alex Jones was the guy on public access TV here in Austin when I was a kid, which is pretty wild.
That's
Um,
awesome.
You know, but I think you're right though. The internet playing a good role in this stuff because like you can start to put two and two together. Like you know, I grew up around like a lot of conservatives. My family was more liberal, but like I started like swimming the same streams as other folks. Then I would be like, well, like I do get my health care through Medicaid and like the food that we get through food stamps. So like actually, I sort of like these things. I don't think they're too much of a problem. And then finding doors that opened up to sort of help explain some of these things. It's like, no, those are good things that we should be fighting for, I think. Something that we got really lucky with, I think, in our generation, having those opportunities to sort of learn more and not have everything mediated through our like, grandmothers and folks like that.
Well, and then they also use that same othering propaganda with that, like, a family that is growing up on food stamps and whatnot, that's, like working hard and doing whatever they can. They have this target of this other family who's growing up on food stamps and all that stuff as they're welfare queens, and they're not working as hard, and we deserve this, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's every time that we do have something that's good, they find a way to twist it into another othering and whatever thing there, and that's a clever tactic that they use. But yeah, I grew up, Aldi, like back in the day, it was like what we called the poor kids grocery store. That's what we got all our shit. And produce is always good. We liked it.
Exactly.
Yeah, we grew up on all that stuff too.
I want to move to another topic that's on everybody's minds, and that's free speech, and get both of your perspectives on this. There's yeah, I'm sure. There's a sort of logic that gets deployed by people who often like to emphasize, when racists are banned from social media platforms as like a big violation of free speech. It says like, if you don't speak up for these guys, then don't come to us when it comes for you. And I always wonder, well, why doesn't this start with the porn? Because that seems to be, if we're starting to slippery slope, like if me personally, I'm doing a platform, I'm going to allow nudity before I'm going to allow like racism personally. I'm just curious,
Yeah.
like,
Well, I mean, let's start there. Like,
yeah,
there's nothing inherently bad or wrong about people's naked bodies, and if you've been taught that, it's like through religion, and nothing wrong with religion, but like there's a lot of Abrahamic religions that teach specifically that women and women's bodies and women's sexuality are negative, right? And that their nudity is specifically wrong, and that it corrupts men, etc., and that they're responsible for men's behavior, right? And so like that's where we've been taught like nudity is bad. There's nothing anywhere close to nudity that has anything to do with like racism, right? Like racism inherently is a structural harm that comes to people. Like people are hurt in a multitude of ways by this, not just like emotionally. I think white people tend to like look at, sorry, I'm definitely white, I'm not saying that. White people like me tend to look at people in a current social and historical context, right? And say like, oh, well, this is just now. What I'm saying is hurting your feelings. That's not what's happening. This person who's almost all people of color, but like in the United States, people who are from marginalized groups tend to see themselves as part of this larger group with lots of historical baggage and grievances, and you're kind of like piling on top of it. It's not about your feelings in that moment or my feelings in that moment. It's about like a historical context of racism and things that have happened in the past, right? Those things are genuinely harmful to people and have actually caused people's deaths. Like those are harmful things. Nudity doesn't hurt people. We are born naked, and there's nothing naturally bad or sinful about our bodies or sexuality. That's a natural human function. It's as natural as breathing or eating. Like racism is something disgusting that humans invented.
right.
Sex isn't.
But you're both. Did it shock you to find out that there's things like shadow banning happening on Twitter?
I mean, when I first discovered it, yes.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
now, like that I've now that I've actually dove into actually like sex worker rights shit, and like I think for a long time I was just a drunk idiot who just wanted to make money and didn't really look or at the world around him. So I was kind of just fumbling through all this stuff, like the porn industry and everything. And then once I actually dove into the like I was saying earlier, because of like my leftward awakening, I started diving into more labor things, and then realizing stuff about sex work, and like, wow, we are really actually marginalized by these platforms, like a lot. Like I didn't realize. I got like my first time I got banned from Instagram in like I don't know, like 2012 or some shit, and like it was a long time ago, and I was just like, haha, whatever. I like posted something that was a little more risque, and I was like, haha, whatever, blah blah blah. But then now, knowing how much that affects people's income and stability and like whole fucking life, a lot of like a lot of people, a lot of sex workers make a lot of their traffic comes from Instagram or Twitter and all this kind of stuff, like a lot of it. And it really
and that's such an important point, because like that's these platforms growing off of that, and they know that. They know that a certain amount of allowance of that is going to be very good for growing their platform, and then when it gets to a certain point, they can pull the rug out from under you guys.
That's an OnlyFans.
Yeah, I mean that's every platform. I mean, if you were to look at historic Tumblr, Twitter, like OnlyFans, like it really wouldn't matter what we were talking about. The push is like get these people in here who get eyes and clicks, and like that people like this content. They do like this content, but then we want to push it back, and actually a lot of that is rhetoric on the right. I'm sure that that like the Republican National Convention declared porn like a public health crisis. I mean, here's the thing: to live in a country where most people cannot access affordable health care, where people are literally dying of preventable illnesses, where we do not have as good a health care as, I don't know, like where's our lung cancer vaccine? They have it in Cuba. Like there's like if you
really?
Yeah, that's pretty neat. Cuba, even though we like suppress them, literally harm them constantly, they actually have a higher literacy rate than we do, and they also have a lung cancer.
But socialism can't work. It can't.
Right. I mean, listen, I've never been to Cuba, but I know they have a higher literacy rate than we do, and they have a lung cancer vaccine. There are other countries that are much more democratically socialist than we are. They have a higher standard of living by every possible way that you could account for it. They have more freedoms, they have better healthcare, every measure that you could look for like what is a good life. Like they have more education, more healthcare, all these different things. But to sit in a country where this is the case and say that like porn is the public health crisis, when there are literally people around you dying of preventable illnesses because they cannot access affordable or appropriate healthcare, is insanity.
But we do have all these guns though. So that's a big
but figure out how to cure cancer with a gun.
But also, I'd be curious.
Your cancer is also dead if you're dead. So
but like the thing is too is with like with censorship, and I'm just curious what y'all's thoughts are on this too. I mean, like having like these big platforms reduce like individual or like small collective groups of people being able to produce and like own their own content. It weakens those people as workers, right? Because then the only way to produce, you have to go to like big organizations or publishing groups, and you don't have that ability, to own your own labor, to sort of make sure that you're not getting like a nasty contract where other people own the rights to your content. I mean, and it's not just sex work. I mean, it's like a lot of other independent media too, like just like what we do. Like if I were working for like a different kind of media firm, I'd have to censor what I'm saying. I wouldn't be able to investigate do the conversations I want to have. And those things get controlled by people who have money and invest in those things. And I feel like the consequences for sex workers is like especially dire when you see these kind of big platforms sort of like censoring them.
I would also tell you that like I feel like the media, social media stuff is only like half of our battle anyway. That like people doing perfectly legal work, and I'm not trying to throw people who might be doing less than legal work under the bus here, but people who are doing perfectly legal work get their Cash Apps, PayPals, Venmo. I've had it happen to me. And in fact, the first account that we had for Suede that was paying sex workers out mutual aid grant money was shut down within like 3 months. And so we've also had one of our Cash Apps shut down. Like, people target these things because and we're completely pushed out of a lot of banking sectors, like entirely. I've known people specifically that have had their entire bank accounts frozen and investigated for months, so they couldn't. There's a lot of reporting on this, and there's a huge document that a bunch of sex workers of all different types have contributed to. And so we have to be extremely secretive. And like, if you have an LLC, you have an S corp, have a business, you can't just waltz up and say, yeah, well, this is an adult photography business, because the second you say something like that, they will take your bank accounts. And if they have any idea that you are using Cash App, Venmo, or PayPal potentially for these kinds of adult transactions, they'll take your money and never give it back to you. You'll never see it again. And so, like, yeah, I mean, I would really like it if, I can abide by Instagram's rules probably, if I'm like a really good citizen, cross my fingers. But like, right, I'm making an account, I don't know, but like, but it's really difficult to replace a bank account. Right. And even Suede went around, we had like 3 different people that we talked to, and we're not doing anything illegal or anywhere close to illegal by giving people money. And we talked to 3 different banks, 4 different banks who were like, first of all, they did not like the idea of mutual aid. I don't know why, but if you said that word, they were like, and then we don't know what that is, and we don't like it. And you could never say like who this money was like going to, because that was also a problem. And we found this out immediately, and our accountant was just like, don't tell the bank.
I just want to, maybe this is petty, but there's some folks who might think that cryptocurrency is the answer to that. And I just want to say the answer is postal banking, where you're covered by the First Amendment, and there should be a right to bank that shouldn't be up to, these financial institutions that have morality clauses and things like this to say, that's icky.
Could you expand on that? What is that?
Postal banking is basically the idea that the post office will run basic deposits and savings and checking and that sort of stuff. And I don't know exactly. I don't know. Maybe you know specifics more, David, on like how savings works and interest and that sort of stuff. But it's not as geared towards speculation. It's basically what normal people want out of bank, which is a place to put their money.
Basically, just gamble with your money anyway, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And the thing is with the post offices, there's a post office everywhere in the country, and they can operate and do those kind of basic financial transactions that we want, like, being able to put cash into a bank account, being able to write a check and all those kind of things, and have that be through the government, which, as Matt was saying, is not a private company. So it doesn't have the ability to say like, we're not going to do this or that, First Amendment protections. And, cause like, just apart from like free speech stuff, I mean, so many working class people are sort of pushed out of the banking system. And in this country, it's really hard to get by without, having access to checking. And then there's a whole nasty industry on top of that preys on people. If you've seen the cash checking companies and things like that. I mean, it's a huge industry too. It's not just like on the margins. I mean, it makes a lot of money. These kind of really nasty firms that try to do that work for working class and poor people who don't have access to traditional banking. And yeah, it's something that you could do very easily. And there's been attempts in the past to do it and try to build these kind of public banks. And then the other thing, I mean, just if we're doing a quick pitch, like the other thing too, is that you can use that kind of money that like banks are like investing in like private firms so that they can make profits. Well, we could use things like public banking, which is a little different from postal banking, to do things that communities want, right? Like most cities don't have the budgets to do certain things. They're totally relying on taxes to do stuff like being able to publicly fund, different kind of renovations and things like that for a city. I mean, this is just basic kind of stuff that makes a lot of sense to people when you explain it to them. The reason we don't have it is not because it's unpopular with people. It's because it's unpopular with financial interests.
Yeah. And I would just add, right. Exactly.
I mean, if they just automatically took taxes out of things like that, even like that would save, because I know there's a lot of poor people, growing up as a poor people, I understand, but there's a lot of people who can't afford to get their taxes properly done. Then the government takes a bigger fucking chunk out of that afterward. It's almost like they depend on people fucking it up so that they can get more money.
It's nickel and dime bullshit. This entire country is really just nickel and dime bullshit. And like, I mean, I say that about postal banking, and with regards to like your industry specifically, I mean, I would worry about Ted Cruz or like Mike Lee or something in putting in like we need to be super concerned about this industry banking for us. But I feel like that would be First Amendment protected. So I mean, I would like to say that's our best bet.
You would feel like a lot of things would be First Amendment. Yeah, and the other thing, you mentioned something earlier, not to digress to a lot, but about the censorship stuff versus like racist Nazi shit on platforms versus like sex work stuff too. Like a lot of, obviously, the stuff that's going on right now with like Musk and all these fucking, the things going on with Twitter and shit. There is this like weird thing that people are doing about these people who love capitalism, yet are trying to impose constitutional, like, basically to take control of a private corporation by saying like, oh, like Twitter has to be First Amendment rights, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, it doesn't, because you are the ones who want to let companies do whatever they want. But because things are being said that you don't like, now you want to bring the government, you want to bring that not big government in to fucking like oversee a company and what they decide they can do. You know what I mean? It's the same shit where like these right-wing people are like getting mad about, oh, the woke mob and it's against my free speech. It's like, no, that's how free speech works. If you say some dumb shit, people are going to say some shit back. Like, it's not freedom from consequences. You know what I mean? Like, that's not what free speech is. It's like, if you say something horrible, expect other people to respond to that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That was just like a kind of thing that I thought of.
Well, I mean, it's all sort of very silly, like especially in the wake of Elon Musk losing these polls on when he should reinstate journalists and if he should step down. I've seen some of his like, sort of venture capitalist friends who always like sort of do his PR, like David Slack or whatever, being like, maybe the other Fortune 500 companies should be run by popular vote too. And first of all, if you think I agree with that, but I would have one addition, which is that it's the workers, right? Like I think,
absolutely.
Right.
Basically, like Twitter employees should be the ones that are making these edge calls, and they shouldn't be forced by a boss to be the ones to say like, oh, actually, we're going to allow this Nazi, and we're not going to allow these boobs, and like that. If the employee, and to me personally, like I think that's where a lot of this gets super confused, because you act like, oh, we have to do all free speech, but we have two people here who know very well that these platforms do not adhere to that at all. They absolutely make all these sorts of calls for the good of the like feed or whatever, right? And I mean, it's very frustrating, and the problem is like, there is a governmental sort of influence. These platforms are worried about either the Republicans getting power or the Democrats getting power and then coming down and regulating them. But to me, it's like they kind of should have to. Like, should these companies be like go into the next pandemic thinking it doesn't matter what you promote or what gets to the front of the page, even if it's like, say, drink your own urine and that's going to save you from the pandemic, if that's the most viral thing. I think Congress should be able to say like, hey, we're going to call you to some sort of responsibility about that, because I think, anyway, we're getting a little bit too far into hypotheticals there. But let's talk about, speaking of pandemics, COVID, I know, did a number on porn. I'm curious, there's two dynamics to that. Like one, you felt it as hard as anybody, the shutdowns, I think. And two, you also have a perspective on the importance of other people taking their health seriously, and like particularly getting infections and things like that. So I'm just curious, like how, what, like sort of reflecting on that and the recent stuff I saw you talking about with the swabs, just like lessons about, nobody wanted this shutdown to end. We also need to look out for each other's safety and that sort of thing.
We just like look at each other like, oh my god. So obviously COVID was like devastating to anybody who had an in-person job where you had to interface with people, and there was some protections that would have been available for people in certain working positions like masks, or even these little clear shields and things like that might have saved you from people's spit and the air they were breathing. That's not a thing on a porn set. And so like we were testing and retesting and testing for a couple of days and isolating and staying away from everybody and only on set. And I think I watched so many performers actually really take the health of other people more seriously than I saw the general public do. I don't know how many times I've been tested for COVID, like hundreds. And during that time, I feel like a lot of people, at least in my industry, were taking it really seriously, and not always, not all of them. I mean, don't get me wrong, but I watched a lot of people take that really seriously, and I'm watching a lot of people try to take what's happening now with us pretty seriously. I do want to emphasize this because I feel like I should say it every time we start to talk about porn. We are the most tested group of people in existence. Like, I don't know anybody else who goes in for blood and urine tests at a minimum every 14 days. And like, it's funny, they wouldn't take my blood, granted, like a testing center, like a what do you call those?
Blood donation.
Blood donation, wouldn't want my blood. But like,
even though it's the most tested blood.
Yeah, but like I can tell you right now that every 14 days for the last several years, I've been tested for HIV. And I've been tested with the most sensitive test in existence. And so one of the reasons I want to talk about this is because I think that there's this idea that people who are doing porn are like spreading disease, or we have STIs, and this is just like patently false. Like, we are really, really good at not doing this. And in fact, I think their last transmission of HIV in the talent pool was more than 10 years ago. So I think it was 2012.
But it wasn't on set.
But it was not on set. It was just in the pool of
I was actually,
I
don't know. I think I can talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was a thing that happened. It's partly why we actually have 14-day testing now.
Yeah.
But I did a scene for Kink years and years ago. I think that was it. Yeah, 2012. Where the other talent was so. Long story short, okay, I'll just wrap this up. So we did this scene. It was a public disgrace scene, and it was just like where it's like a big party, and then there's a heavy kink scene going on in the middle of the party. So I was the male performer, the dom in that. The female talent and her boyfriend that were there. I find out after the scene because, like I said, we test all the time, all that stuff. I'd actually gotten cut. Her tooth cut me. And so this made it extra scary, obviously. But there was a point in that where after that scene, like 3 days later, her and her boyfriend's test came back positive. And it was a very scary time. And then I ended up, some people went on the news and like different radio things and said that I was the one who infected them and all this shit.
Oh, Jesus.
And it was insane. So like my whole career halted, my whole like life. I just was, it was very suicidal times for me. And I was terrified. And then so I was testing every other day or every day to see if that was the case. And then after about a week of testing every day, and then all that, like all these stories and stuff were circulating about me being the one who passed this to people. And it's a really hard time to think about, but then finally, I started just posting my tests on social media with my real name and all that shit, and I was just like, putting that out there, like, hey, this is not me, and I can't believe that somebody would blame me. You know what I mean? It was a whole thing. But,
I did not know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that you were involved in that.
Oh yeah, I was yes, very very involved.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to was the story planted, or what was that's very strange that would.
Well, I think that the people who said that about me were just scared and didn't want to be blamed for what had happened.
Interesting.
And so I think they saw me as an easy target in their eyes, I guess, to try to put the blame on.
Wow.
So yeah, that was a thing.
Well, and I mean, I heard you guys on a space like a week or so ago, and Xander, you made the point like the absurdity of saying like this is it's violating my HIPAA rights for me to say like if whether I'm tested or not. Like in porn, you kind of see like that doesn't fly.
Yeah. So I mean, and I want to say this: we are a very well-regulated industry when it comes to self-regulation. This is part of the issue that we're having right now. Is that we have this board called PASS, which is a performer safety board. They were getting so we have these testing laboratories that you can use that PASS certified that performers said, these are the tests we need. These are the tests to keep us safe. PASS created them, or PASS didn't create them, but they standardized them between the labs. And then both of those labs decided, well, we have the trust of the industry. We're the only industry around that does these tests. So we're going to leave PASS, which is a nonprofit oversight board. Why should we want to be regulated by PASS? Why should we follow their rules? And now PASS doesn't get alerts when people's tests don't clear.
Yeah.
And a clear test would mean you're cleared to go on set and work. And everybody I have ever known, I'm really lucky because I came in kind of as a content creator, and the people who were working with me even though I was not like a main porn star, I wasn't doing anything with studios, they were very much like, no, these are the rules, these are the standards, these are what you're going to hear to, these are like our testing standards, these are our testing bodies, this is like how we stay safe. And people really took me under their wing, and they taught me, which was really kind. And anyway, PASS is the one. So PASS should be able to call a filming moratorium whenever we are unable to work because there are people testing positive, not clearing their tests in our talent pool. And because our two major testing companies, which are talent testing and cutting edge testing, pulled out and decided they don't want to be governed anymore and they don't want to send any more information to PASS, we are in a lot of kind of danger at this point. Yeah. I mean, I want you to think about this. The oversight committee doesn't get any more data from any of these places. And so if we were to need to do a moratorium, now we don't know it.
Well, that's how this happened.
That is exactly how this happened.
This new thing. The thing I was talking about before, what happened to me, was two other people came up positive for HIV that I worked with, and they blamed me for
But I guarantee you.
This is what we're talking about, is the chlamydia gonorrhea thing.
I guarantee you, whenever this happened, PASS shut down the industry so that they could make sure.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so they could make, that's why we have PASS, right? So, oh my gosh, there was someone with HIV who's in our talent pool. Well, we got that test back to PASS. We're going to close down the industry. Nobody's going to film anything. Yeah. Nobody's going to shoot, so that we can make sure we're very well self-regulated, right? We're going to make sure that this
we have to be.
We have to be, yeah. We're going to make sure that this doesn't get passed on to somebody. Nobody else gets exposed to this, that it was just these two people that came in and got exposed somewhere along the line, not on a set, and then that they can't pass it to anyone else. And so it's a huge issue that our testing agencies decided they just don't want to be regulated anymore.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's about
any kind of rationale.
Yeah, I was like, who's behind that decision? Is it the agencies themselves?
No, agencies, no. It is talent testing and cutting edge testing. These are two private laboratory companies. They decided they do not want to be regulated by the board that certified them as the place we could go in the first place. Yeah. And they don't want to have to listen to them, and they don't want an oversight committee. And so now they want to be able to do whatever they want. And that does not feel safe to a lot of performers. How do we know that they're, how do we know what kind of tests they're going to use? Are they going to be the best test? How do we know where they're sending our samples now? How do we know when a large number of people or any people are testing positive in our performer pool? Are we going to get notified, alerted? Because they're not sharing data to PASS, which is the oversight board.
And so speaking on the PASS moratoriums in the past, I remember days we were literally on set shooting for Brazzers, and because there's been false positives, right? There's not been false negatives, but there's been false positives. And I remember literally the spaceship was about to dock, if you know what I mean. And it was right there, and then all of a sudden a PA comes running in stop. We just got a fucking email from PASS that there is, and they never said who, they just said, hey.
Yeah, we don't know who.
Yeah, there was a performer who tested positive for HIV or whatever. So we're going to call, and so the production companies, especially MindGeek, Brazzers, they were just okay, we're done. Everybody go home. We can eat lunch and hang out, but everybody has to, no fluid exchange. And then, 2 or 3 days later, we find out it was a false positive. But that isn't a problem. That I want an industry that's that fucking serious about it, that even if there's a chance that it's not the case, that we stop and protect people.
Right.
And also I'll say, with Brazzers, specifically the MindGeek, the companies I work for, we had, when the pandemic kicked off, all the crew and director had to wear masks on set. Like that was how that was. Like they all had the masks on. And before that, man, it's funny because it's like sometimes the ads you see on the side of porn sites, I'm in a lot of those, but like there's some of them that I shot with my fucking cell phone because Brazzers was like, hey, we don't want to have crew on set. We're going to have you. And was that ours? No, ours was a crew. Cody and I's first scene was on our phones. But so Brazzers would send me a script and be like, hey, here's what we want. Here's how we want everything to be. And literally they would do it like almost like a CIA safe house drop off. Like it was like they would set up all the equipment inside, wipe it down, and then leave, and then be like, okay, you guys can come and enter the house now. And so then we would enter the house, set up the cameras, all the lights and stuff, and the stands would already be set up. We'd set the phones up and shoot exactly what they wanted us to shoot like that. And so it was a really interesting way of like keeping it going, but like trying to be as safe as they could while maintaining content flow. But MindGeek definitely took a shit ton of steps to try, and they also were covering people's tests and all that stuff for COVID tests, because up until like we stopped all of a sudden giving a shit about COVID, MindGeek had basically, there was a point where it was a fucking 24-hour test. Like that's how serious it was. Like to the point where I was getting COVID tested like 3 times a week. Like it was just like, all right, it was a lot. And so like that was, and even after that, MindGeek was, the last ones to go to 7 days, the last ones to go to 14 days, and like all that stuff. So they were, and obviously, I mean, it's a huge corporation. It's basically the Disney of porn. Like they just own everything. So obviously they're watching their asses legally and stuff all the time too. But it did make us feel, as like contract performers especially, it made us feel a lot safer in dealing with that.
Xander's contract with them, and I would say like MindGeek is obviously they've sinned plenty in this industry, right? Yeah. Back in the day, and some of the things that they have done maybe previously with like Pornhub are not great. But I can also tell you that they're one of the only industries that the only companies I've ever seen do anything to address it, right? Mm-hmm. Like when people were saying, hey, like there's revenge porn up on Pornhub, there's like depictions of CSA on Pornhub. The people that are in charge right now made a big effort to switch that and to change that. I mean, and it's been, probably 12 years of them. And I'm going to talk a little bit about CSA because I always feel this topic comes up when we talk about sex work, talk about pornography. The biggest hosts of CSA on the internet is Facebook. But you will see right-wing groups and evangelicals come after MindGeek, come after Pornhub, come after a place where a lot of people make their money. And they were very successful in that. They got MasterCard and Visa to stop utilizing that as being able to use MasterCard and Visa on the Pornhub platform. The only thing that happened was that legitimate models with IDs on the site now can't make money on it. Yeah. Nothing else happened. And you ask yourself, I mean, I ask myself, as somebody who has definitely worked with victims of CSA, and definitely we interface with people who are victims of trafficking. We have people
through your therapy stuff.
People who've been victims of trafficking also in our organization. I think there's a lot of people who ask, how did that help people who were victims of trafficking to take away money from legitimate models with IDs on the site? Mm-hmm. And that's been something that I've seen MindGeek as a brand like move towards over many, many years, right? Like being more ethical, being there for the models, performers, etc. And in some ways, like really helping workers. Right now, what we're talking about with testing too is also like a worker safety thing. To me, this seems like we have to kind of band together and be like, we need worker safety. This is another piece of worker safety. We need it at our job,
There was some people also in one of the spaces that was basically, they were like, because MindGeek is one of the major like contributors to the pass thing. Mm-hmm. And they were like basically saying like, well, how can we trust it if there's a major corporation that's the one giving all the money to it? And it's like,
that's the thing is like industry standards.
Like I don't understand. Like it's like I'm no like a corporate shill, but like because I have had meetings with MindGeek, like board meetings, where I'm just up Bernie Sanders yelling at the fucking table about like how we should be doing things and why this is wrong. Like I had one where it was like a bunch of the the head people the corporate people, and basically I had this grievance about set safety because it was a long time ago. I shot a scene where it was in this gym that was just a gym, and there was nobody in the gym obviously except for us that were shooting there, and it was an anal scene with a girl, and there was no showers, and they didn't wipe down this. Like literally, when I asked them to wipe down the gym equipment, they used baby wipes, and I was like, "How old are you? Like, what the fuck is happening here? Like, baby wipes aren't. What are you doing? Like, this is." And so basically, like, I was like, we should not have to shoot on a set, or at least be informed beforehand that there is not a shower here. Like, we need to have a place where we can actually like clean ourselves. Like, that's ridiculous. So even and you know, it's happened. It's happened before. It's happened since then. But like 90, I would say. I mean, we don't really shoot on locations anymore that much. But like, they always try to provide you with a place. They'll even, if you ask them to get you a hotel room so that you can shower off, they'll do that. Because we had another scene where a girl, God, we were shooting this scene with these female talent in Florida. And Florida is a place that exists. But basically, we had this outdoor scene in a Jeep with me and these three girls. And the one girl had to fly home that day. And basically, these fucking idiots who have been since reprimanded and dealt with in Florida wanted her to complete this scene and then just take her to the airport. So like 4 of us having sex outside in fucking muggy ass Florida.
That sounds right.
And you know, covered in all fun juice, and then just be like, okay, we'll take you to the airport now. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like,
I've definitely been at the airport in that situation. I'm definitely like, you're at the airport.
What the fuck, dude? And so, like, these are like things that I like brought up in these meetings, and you know, they listen. Mind Equal listen to performance is basically what I'm getting.
Well,
at. Like,
and the point I make, like, I want to make about that is like industry standards can be sort of self-interested, but like that's good, like, right?
yeah,
like,
absolutely, yes. You know?
and like, and we also exist in a world that those hard fought for, like, by people like yourself and learned lessons that can be forgotten, and that's what it seems like is happening with this whole testing thing. Like, oh, what's the worst that could happen? I can't believe, like, are they saying like this is for efficiency, like, or are they just like, peace, we don't want to play anymore?
I can tell you the story that I've been told. Yeah, it's funny.
Right.
It costs money, of course, to like be reporting. It has to be like someone's whole job, basically, to like be reporting to this agency, right? Like,
Yeah.
what's the benefit for them? They have to hire somebody who like transfers this data and like handles this data to pass, and then it interfaces with pass. That doesn't really. There's no monetary benefit in that for them. So why would they do it? Yes. And then the other one is that PASS is a nonprofit. So they go around and they certify labs that can meet our standards. And we do have some specific standards, right? We need the most sensitive HIV test in all of existence. We need 2 kinds of syphilis tests. So they run double. We only use an Aptima Combo 2 Panther assay. I shouldn't know this, but I do, because I called a laboratory this morning and asked them for gonorrhea and chlamydia, right? Like, those are the things we need. And we had to have these really specific turnaround times, 24 hours or less. So PASS went around trying to find some other labs. Maybe there's some labs that are nonprofits. Maybe there's some labs that would be less costly for performers because our tests are really expensive.
Yeah, they are.
Now they're more.
Now they're more. But it's cheaper than the industry shutting down. So yeah.
It's cheaper than not working. So they went around trying to find some laboratories that they could also include, and they got a couple of laboratories on board. And my understanding from people that have, I think, no reason to lie to me, was that talent testing specifically wanted to sit on their nonprofit board. And they said, no, we're a nonprofit and we don't want a corporation sitting on our board. And as a result, they said, when PASS said no, talent testing pulled out of PASS. Yeah. And this is actually the second time they pulled out of PASS. They were pressured to rejoin before. But they pulled out in October, and then in November, talents are like, something's wrong. A bunch of people we know are testing positive. We're not sure what's going on. Tons and tons of sets are being canceled. What's going on? And it's funny because we said something to actually both talent testing and CET, who have put out the most gaslighting statements ever, telling us that isn't happening, like that we're making it up. That I talked to someone who's a talent coordinator for Brazzers, who said that in the month of November that she had fielded more than 100 calls from people who were trying to, who were saying that they were exposed and had to reschedule their shoot because they didn't know if they were positive and needed to get retested, or that they were positive. Like 100 calls, she personally, I have known more than a dozen people who have had this issue, so I know what the problem is, right? I know that they literally in 1 month pulled out of our only organization that did contact tracing and told us if we needed to be worried and needed to shut down the industry. They pulled out, and then all of a sudden we have problems, and it's not a shocker.
Well, and also I think one of the other things leading that to the money thing, them having to run tests on the swabs that we use now would be more expensive for them as well. So I mean, I think that's a factor in that too.
There's also pressure from PASS, our board and our organization, because there's pressure from performers for them to lower the cost of these things, right? Because we are testing twice a month. So there's a big push where we're like, this is too expensive. You make so much money off of us. Like
literally millions and millions and millions of dollars. The swab thing, obviously. I mean, it's not fun, because they don't do it for you.
I think it would be worse.
I don't. I think that would be easier because, literally. Okay, so you asked us on here, so there you go. So, literally, when I did the swabs too, because we had to basically for penis havers. We have to do the throat swab and the anal swab as well, right? So, I mean, and that was crazy too. Fuck, I think you were in there when I was talking to people about this, and I was like, you are the dumbest fuck. Why are you allowed to talk to people? But for men, it was for penis havers. Well, I'm specifically it was straight guys who had the issue with it, right? Cis. That's the one. Yes. Yeah, cis straight dudes who had the issue with it. Because they're like, well, I don't know why I would have anything in my butt because I don't do that shit. And it's like, do you like getting your ass eaten, dumbass? What are you talking about? That is, just do it. Stop being a fucking idiot. Just do it. You know what I mean? You don't know what's gonna happen. So it's you have to go in there and just fucking do that whole thing yourself, and it doesn't feel good. They don't give you any help, any lube or anything. You just gotta shove a dry ass fucking Q-tip up your ass. It sucks.
Well, and to be honest,
but for vagina havers, Jesus, you guys have.
Well, actually, urine analysis is okay
for penis havers.
For us too, it's actually about 4% less accurate for people who have vaginas. Yeah, it's about 4% less accurate. I mean, it's pretty accurate. So you're probably good without utilizing a swab vaginally, but who knows what the exact standard will become. But it's not uncommon that you talk to someone, even though their job is to have sex, and they don't know some things that are pretty basic. I mean, I was on a set the other day, and this person had told me they've been working in porn since 1996. And the person I was talking to, I was saying, yeah, because you can transmit bacterial STIs from your throat. And she was like, what? And I was like, yeah. So, and then I'm explaining this to somebody who's older than me, who's worked in this since I was a little kid, right? And I'm just kind of oh, okay. Not that we're not experts in this. None of us, well, some of us are. Yeah. Some of us are nurses and doctors and microbiologists, but for the most part, we're not experts in this. We just have a higher risk and tend to need to know these things,
Yeah. And that was, that was a lot of the things that I heard being said too. It was well, how could, the P test said I'm fine. But it's stuff can still live in your mouth. If you wash your hands, if you wash all the steak juice off your hands, you'll still have steak juice in your mouth. You know what I mean?
Okay.
You gotta brush your teeth too.
We should use the word steak juice.
Yeah, I'm gonna that's fine now. You have to pay me to say it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It was a very, very stupid.
Well, we'll need to test all the places where steak juice could
Yeah.
have possibly gone.
Yeah. What if you sat on a steak?
If you said,
Now you got steak juice on your ass. You gotta figure it out, man. Come
but
on.
the truth is, it's been performers for a long time that have pushed for, hey, we need more testing, we need to add more, we need to be really sure. And so, like, in this moment too, I'm certain that, like, if we can stick together, if we can have a unified message, if we can say, hey, like, to me, this is a workers' rights thing. Like, this is how I feel. Like,
Absolutely.
you know, I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna work. And shit, I'm nobody. So, like, if I don't work, they're gonna find.
Okay.
Well, they'll find somebody else. I promise you, because it's already happened.
No, I was literally gonna say there's been companies that have canceled people for asking for the better
Right.
tests.
It happened to me. It happened to me that
I wasn't gonna say that.
Yeah, it happened to me. It happened to me that a major company that I went out to work with in LA, I said, I will work with this talent, happy to do it, but I would like to have a swab test done. And for that male talent, I said, I will pay for the swab test. I realize it's expensive. Male talents tend to make less and more money. Don't know who this person is, but this is, you know, the first week in, nobody's requiring it. So, like, I'll pay for it. I just don't want to come back from the set with an STI.
Yeah.
And I was told that they would just hire someone else. That was
Wild stuff.
Jesus, yeah. Lord.
Actually, the exact words were, "It's not going to happen." So, yeah, and I don't think that that's like that company. Maybe they're, you know, who knows? I have no idea who they are. I would assume, I've never worked with them before. I would assume that the director or whoever was on that set just said, "Well, I don't know what that is," and that seems like a pain in the ass. And
That's true.
Maybe literally.
Nice.
That seems like a pain in the ass, and I don't know if I want to ask the guy to do that. I don't even know what it is, so I'm just gonna say no. And I think that is the part where we need to be like on message with like these folks. Like, why are we asking for this?
But it was the same thing when we were talking about in those calls about striking. If that would ever happen, there's always going to be scabs, especially in this industry. Like, there are people who will work regardless.
And that should be something that should be said about like sex work in general. Like, a lot of people do sex work because they're part of a more marginalized group. They are disabled. They can't work a regular job. There are a lot of people who are in that boat that do sex work. And I use sex work as an umbrella term, not talking just about porn, but like as, you know, all types of sex work, because they are more marginalized identities. And it's really, really hard, right, to say like, oh, let's make it cost more and don't work without this thing when, you know, there are people underneath you that are not earning as much money and may not be able to say no to a job, and even if they're not safe, you know.
And I mean, that's like the challenges. I mean, how over the course of working with Suede, like that sort of consciousness, what's your sort of observations on, you know, what you notice among sex workers?
Look at me. As a consciousness, what I notice about sex workers, I notice, at least in my general vicinity, that sex workers tend to spend a lot of time trying to keep one another safe. And there's a belief generally that no one else is going to, and that if we don't, that it won't happen. I'm in a couple of different group spaces, and I have been for years, where I feel like I just see people warning one another. This unsafe thing happened. You want to avoid this. This bad thing happened to me, so be careful. This is a constant thing. I would also tell you that when we talk about censorship on social media, this is the way that sex workers get hurt, right? When I get disconnected from the only people that might have been able to tell me about something that would hurt me, when I get disconnected from that group of people that says, hey, watch out for such and such things so that you don't get an STI or you don't get in trouble or you don't lose your bank account, right? Like, then I'm not going to know. And so people who get disconnected are the people who lose their livelihoods and get hurt. And that's actually one of the ways that we keep each other safe. You know, don't get me wrong, there's outlier assholes everywhere, but like for the most part, I would say that the vast majority of people who work in sex work, as a broad term, and I mean dancers, and I mean phone sex operators, and I mean clip creators, and I mean full service sex workers, I watch them on a large scale spend a good portion of their time doing the mutual aid of keeping other people safe.
Yeah, I think that, like, I know the groups you're talking about, so I think we should talk about that after as well, but I think male talent could use a group like that.
Yeah, you could, actually. Yeah, you could.
Yeah, because we're like, male talent especially have been, I'll say at least from like when I started in the industry, like it was it was a lot seen as like almost like one of those old military movies where it's like, figure it out, idiot. You know what I mean? Like, get out there in the live fire and fucking show you're a man, whatever. And it's like, you gotta fucking, yeah, it was very much, I don't know. I think a lot of times, I mean, I think that just stems from like the toxic masculine kind of upbringings in general, like general societal prescription of being a fucking cis man. But yeah, in the industry, it wasn't any different. I think a lot of male talent are afraid. Like, I personally have like, there's a lot of male talent that I'll just reach out to. We might not be friends, you know what I mean? But as a guy who's been doing this for 14 years and has a bit like a decent name for himself, I would, you know, I try to reach out when I see, especially when I see or hear about male talent falling into the same dumb behaviors that I did back in the day, you know, partying too hard and just being a fucking idiot. Like, I try to be there for them as a person who's like made all the mistakes and done all the dumb shit. As a fuck up who has gotten their shit together a lot more. I'm still an idiot a lot of times, but you know, I feel like that's a really good way for especially male talent and men in general to learn. Is from like other guys who've been there, especially in places where they have a bit of a name in whatever industry, is like kind of reaching out and being like, you know.
I would just tell you this, like somebody who's not appearing to be a male person when I'm talking or interfacing with anyone, that if men listen to other men in a way that they never listen to women. I don't know how to say that, but there's things that I have said to men over and over, and I feel like I've tried to say it different ways and tried to like listen to their feelings and tried to like be really blunt, and I've tried all different things. And then I can really literally watch another guy say the same thing to them and then just absorb it. Their heart's open to it. I don't know if that makes any sense, but like for whatever reason, you guys are more believable to male audiences. Like things that you tell them, they listen to and take to heart.
I think that's also a symptom of the
it's misogyny.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that kind of
is being taught that your whole, like when you're a kid, like, you know, especially with like, you know, dads from my generation and shit. You know, it's not something, we're not born misogynist.
No.
We're not born that way. We're taught that, just like racism and everything else. You know, I mean, you have to learn to be shitheads.
Yeah. It's actually why it was so heartening to see like male performers be like, look, I tested positive on an anal swab and you should go get swabbed, because I saw 10 dudes underneath those posts being like, oh, really? Yeah,
it's amazing how like fluids work, idiot.
This is somebody they respect, right? This is somebody that they believe, and that's what's important. I mean, we talk about messaging, no matter what we're talking about, right, left, whatever. We interface with people that we emotionally connect with and people that we believe and respect.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of brings me to my last question. And this idea, like Josh Hawley got on stage at TPUSA and he's talking about, you know, stop watching porn and go out. And porn gets the blame for a lot of societal problems. And I think there are certain, like, you know, places you can go and get sort of a wrong model as to how you should sort of interact. But I also think, like, and to your point earlier, Xander, about kink.com, like, there are actually places that are pretty positive for people that don't have really any place to go to learn about these sorts of things. I'm just curious, like, for your sakes, and like, I mean, it must be like kind of like a way. I mean, we even talked to Mike Racine, which comedy is a similar sort of thing where guys particularly guys trying to work out, like, what is it to be a guy in this world? They look at comedians. And I'm just curious, like, what you think, like, sort of, you know, you probably get an interesting view on this sort of dynamic. And I feel like Summer, you kind of already summed it up, which is most guys have a difficult time listening to women. And I would say that's probably one thing to probably change about yourself. But whatever you guys want to go in direction from that.
So one more time. So what was the action? What was the
like this space gets a lot of flack as like, you know, this is why society is turning bad, but actually like there while there could be some bad things perhaps, there's also like it's also a space where people can actually see good models of like you say, like being tested and actually having different types of relationships that aren't just like, you know, misogynistic.
Right. Well, kink is good.
I was going to say I have 3 points on this really quickly. It has really always been super strange to me that like people would see things in porn and say like, oh, this is real and this is what I should do and this is how I should behave. And we don't put that same onus on like movies, right? So like if I see Tom Cruise jump out of a plane, I'm not like, you know what, I could jump out of a plane. And then like we blame the movie. I've never heard someone do that, right? Like I've never heard someone be like, you know what it is, you know why people act so crazy and drive like assholes all over the road. It's Tom Cruise. Yeah. Because that's ridiculous. And this is also ridiculous. Like, I do think like there is an issue of like media literacy, but like knowing what you're watching. And I do think it would be okay to talk a little bit more about, you know, how we actually test consent, how we actually do talk about every scene I've ever been in. I talk about limits and what we're going to do before we do it. You know, it'd be good for people to know that. But at the same time, I just want to be like, this is not more real than the movie you watched with Tom Cruise. Why am I responsible for your behavior and you're not? And like, why is like media responsible for your behavior and your inability to distinguish reality from like something you watched on TV?
Yeah. I've had that. I've brought that up in like interviews and stuff too. It's like where people saying the same thing, and it's like, it's like, Jason Voorhees didn't actually kill any of those camp counselors. Like that was a movie.
That was pretend.
So what I was going to say about kink earlier too, kink was the first place I ever was in porn that did like really extreme, wild, crazy shit, right? That my first times being on those sets, I was just like, holy fuck. But it was also the first place where you sit in an office and discuss the things that you're okay with and not okay with happening to you or being done around you. And they were super fucking on top of that shit. Like it was so incredible when I first got to kink. And because I'd seen kink.com and I'm like, wow, they just do whatever they want. It's wild. But no, like you actually learn, and that's BDSM in general, is that those communities are super, super into consent ideas and like what you're okay with. Like there's BDSM relationships that are, lifestyle dom and sub type shit where there's still safe words, there's still ways to like deactivate, but like that's the whole point, is being able to enjoy this fantasy of this thing. You know what I mean?
There's so many people that like they seem confused about consent, and I sometimes am like I encounter that a lot. But what about this situation? What about that situation? How do you know if a person consents? And like that's really not something that I've encountered when I've worked in porn. Like we've been like it's really clear. It's something we're always communicating. It's something like that's always being worked on. So it's always been really weird to me when people are like consent and like you're not modeling consent, and I'm like, yeah, I mean you're not behind the scenes with us, right? You see the finished project and we're not like showing you how the sausage is made. Like
you didn't show the fake knife that Jason Voorhees got because it looked real when he cut that camp concert.
Right.
So you should be punished for that.
Well, maybe we should mandate that your guys' sort of contract signing sessions is put right like for 5 minutes right at the front where you're just going through the different clauses and crossing.
You know what? Honestly, I don't think that would be a terrible idea for the end of scenes.
No.
Like for like literally during the credit roll, I think it would be kind of cute and even sexy to like have the two talent talking about like, God, I wish they would put my fucking consent checklist out there. They film
those. They're filmed. Like I don't know how many. I mean, I've not worked that much for kink, just a few times, but I worked a lot for Insects, which is they have a bunch of sites, and they do a lot of BDSM. And at the end of it, like you do an interview where they're like, "Let's see the marks on your body. are you okay? Something hurt?
Mhm.
Everybody treat you appropriately? Are you all right? And before you do it, you do an interview where you sign on the paper, like, I will do this, I will do that. And they're like, you sure? You know what this would be like? And you're like, yeah.
Mhm.
And you talk about, I mean, it's not just informed consent, it's fucking enthusiastic consent.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sitting there writing this and being like, yeah. You know, like, that's been my experience every single time.
And even then, there's safe words and stuff.
Yeah.
Like that.
Oh,
and also,
absolutely.
I'm so sorry. Earlier, you said you had 3 points, and I think you made 1.
Oh.
'Cause I listen to women.
I personally have found like there's tons of things that I wouldn't know that I was into, except that like I was in these
Fucking
situations. Yeah, and I thought these like,
Yeah, right.
man, back in the day, like Tumblr used to be like a place where you could like go and you could really explore some like fetishes and cool shit, and
Yeah.
it was out there, and it was very inclusive of different bodies and very
Mhm.
inclusive of people of different genders, and like there's that whole thing for me. I mean, I also grew up in like a very religiously restricted place in a rural area, Texas. Like I'm telling you, like these kinds of things were like taboo. They were never allowed for me, especially like I would say something like bisexuality or like being gay. Like that's so not allowed. And like there's been all these different avenues through both pornography and things that I've made that have allowed me personally and tons of people that I interface with as fans, like to explore their own sexuality. I would tell you, like on OnlyFans and stuff like that, when I'm talking to people, one of the most common things that people are telling me is like, I didn't know I was into that, and like you've made me feel accepted, or you've made me feel like I could explore gender stuff, or you made me feel like I could explore bisexuality, or
Fuck yeah, dude.
like stuff like that. And that's fucking cool. Like that's
Yeah, it's
that's
so
a,
cool.
yeah, it's a fucking cool part of porn.
Mhm.
And that's why the right wing hates it. Like, right? Like that's the real reason they hate
Yeah.
it. And I one thing I just wanted to say, mention earlier is like anybody who is like claiming to like be about save the kids or whatever, if they're not for sex ed in schools, then they're not for saving kids, because the number one
yeah.
way. Go ahead.
If you're against this, why don't you go ahead and tackle child marriage, which is legal in tons of states? Like, if you want to protect children from sexuality, how about you stop letting them get married at
And
14?
what color are those states?
I mean, I just start here.
What-
How about stop letting them
Red
get married at
states?
14?
That's weird. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
that's the insane part. It makes me so angry to see people be like, pornography is harming children. And I'm like, or maybe it's like that you let them get married when they're 12.
Yeah.
Right.
Like
That's
maybe child brides are a problem, actually, if you're gonna like stop that. And let me like also just throw some other thing out here. Protect children, my fucking ass. Like there are so many states that arrest minors who are being trafficked, and they go to juvenile detention centers or prisons. Texas is actually the worst. I'm not in Texas right now, just so you know, but Texas is the worst offender of all of these. You can have been trafficked as a 14-year-old and go to jail or prison in Texas. And you want to talk about protecting kids? You want to talk about saving trafficking victims? Like start there.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
Even here in Vegas, like it's and you taught me this. Yeah, it's like you do with so many things, but like the if you report yourself as being trafficked, you'll get arrested here
Yeah.
for being trafficked.
so.
The person who trafficked you doesn't like they never catch those guys.
You know,
but they
hopefully,
always get
but like if they suspect people are victims of trafficking here, they'll take you to jail. Adults, minors, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
how is that protecting anybody? Because the goal, and we all know the goal, is not really to protect anyone. Because if the goal was to protect anyone, they would do things to protect them.
right.
Yeah.
Like again, into child marriage or stop arresting victims of trafficking. Either
Yeah.
of those things would be very easy to do. Have you ever heard anyone on the right even talk a day about any of them? Because I haven't.
Yeah, and what you were saying earlier about the people finding like validation and all that stuff. It was also when I hit up Brazzers about doing the scenes with trans girls on the main sites, because we'd never done that. There was always trans girl sites that were shot through not the lens that a lot of my trans girlfriends want to be shot through. You know what I mean?
Right.
It was shot through a lens that was focusing on
The gay side.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It was shot through
It
a gay
relegates them to
lens.
the gay
Yes.
side, yeah.
Right,
And I had after I did that, it was incredible the amount of like messages like like love mail that I got. The hate mail was wild too, but the amount of like, and also just hearing from other young male talent in the industry who hit me up about like, hey man, like, I've always, I've been like super like attracted to trans girls, and I didn't want to say anything because of the weird judgment shit in the industry, blah blah blah. And hearing this from like a lot of dudes and guys I didn't expect to hear it from, and it was, that was wild, man. It was cool, and to like kind of be able to help the trans friends that I shot with and trans people in general be able to be trans sex workers be on. Because that was the industry issue for a long time, was because it was shot through this gay lens, and people were like, "Oh, that's gay somehow,"
Right.
and it doesn't fucking matter if it was like if a person's gay, but it's not like that's a woman and should be shot like a woman. Like that's how it is. And so like that's kind of like what we were going for there too. But like that was I think that was definitely a big part of that for me, was like just seeing how affected positively so many cis guys I talked to and trans men and trans women that I talked to after that was like, a validating thing about like, I mean, more companies now doing this and making it a point is, is huge.
There's also just like so many people that feel like they cannot talk about things that they like, things that they enjoy, things that like there's no avenue for them like in their life, and like you might be the only like safe person that they can actually say this to. And I mean performers, but I also mean like people that I would tell you that about like I'm an 11-year camp veteran. There are people that have told me things, personal things that are like touching, sweet about their own gender or sexuality, that journey for them, that like I don't know, like I was the only safe person to initially come, with that too, and now it's this happens to sex workers all the time. I would tell you, like they're kind of like the first person to like absorb these kinds of things and bounce them off this.
Yeah, it's like unofficial sex therapists. Like one of a person who's like a bit like a fan, quote unquote, for I hate that term, but it's such a weird. But she for a long time was just like felt really suppressed in her sexuality, and over the last like 4 or 5 years, she got involved in this BDSM community, and she's like happier than she's ever been. And she's just talking about, it's so cool to see this person who was like, from a sheltered kind of thing, now being able to explore herself and have fun and enjoy her life. And she told me how much it's improved, like just her regular, like well-being. It's like not, not.
That's a super rewarding. That's like for me a super rewarding part of doing this. Not that I'm like trying to like shepherd anybody into like sexuality or orientations or what they like sexually.
But be who you are.
Yeah, but like sometimes you get to give people permission to enjoy something that is just inherently something they like and be positive about it. And like there.
Looks like we got a little.
Oh, sorry, we just lost you guys. Now you're back. Sorry, just cut out for a split second there. You were on a roll there, Summer, though.
I was just saying there's so few sex positive spaces like in life. There are so few places in life that you're allowed to express sexuality, to be sexual, to like tell people about it, and it's okay, that like I actually do think like sex workers on a frequent basis, and I would say this again, and maybe this is me just being like, sex positive, and I've heard the criticisms of sex positivity, and I think they're valid, to a degree. But like sexuality is a normal part of human beings, and like this is a thing that it can be cool, and it can be beautiful, and it can be about self-exploration if we just don't judge it and treat it like it's terrible and nasty and awful, and no one should ever do it.
Right. Well, Xander Corvus, xcorvus777 on Twitter, and Summer Hart, HARTXXX on Twitter. Well, for as long as you guys are allowed on Twitter, as long as any of us are, I guess.
Yeah, that's true.
They got Binder the other day, right?
Yeah. They did, but hey, you can't keep us down. So Binder is back on. I mean, Elon can't really get anything to stick, it seems, at this point. But thank you both so much for joining us. Anything else, Suede? Where should people direct their energies?
So Suede is a mutual aid group for sex workers, and we don't just mean people that do porn. We mean anybody who utilizes their sexuality to make a living. So that would include dancers, full service sex escorts, and phone sex operators, and I don't know, lots and lots of people. And basically what we do is we give out microgrants. So we don't do means testing, which is like very much Xander's influence here, right? We don't do means testing. We trust people with like why they need it. I'm not saying it's unlimited, but we give what we can to people who are in need. And we have a request form right now. We actually, this should come live today. If it hasn't come live today yet. We are trying to help performers with a small subsidy for their testing, since their testing is going to cost more, and lots of people need to be swabbed right now because of what's been going on. So we have a new form for that, so people can request a subsidy from us. And we also do harm reduction supplies. So like you need Plan B, you need Narcan, you need fentanyl test strips, you need clean needles, you need just basically stuff to keep you alive and safe. And by the way, I do, because I saw this on YouTube, people being like, they're promoting sex and drugs. No, I am not. There are some people who have
saying that we are.
Yes,
that's awesome.
There are people who have sex for money, and I think those people deserve to be full human beings who have rights, protections, and have things to make their work safe. And I also believe that drug users don't deserve to die. And too many of us have lost friends and people that we know. I lost somebody this year. Like we need to, as a community, we had the ability as a nonprofit to become a Narcan distributor for the state. So we did. And we see people who are, using substances as comrades and believe, I don't know, weirdly, fucking radically, I guess, that they don't deserve to die of overdoses. I have gotten the most hate mail and the most nasty shit sent to me on Instagram over giving people Narcan. I couldn't believe it. Anyway, we will give you condoms. We will give you Plan B. We will give you Narcan, fentanyl test strips. We will try to get you other stuff too, including clean needles. If you email us or go to our website, there's a request form for harm reduction supplies. And we do other stuff. Like, I don't know, we help somebody have an abortion through abortion hosting. We've helped people move. I don't know. We do what we can for the community when we can, right? One time we drove to Arizona to pick a girl up. I don't know. We give people bus passes. Like, it's mutual aid in the way. We have some, structured stuff, and then we do try to like help inside of our community in whatever ways we can,
It's wonderful.
That sounds
that's the problem with these fucking radical leftists, dude. They want to help people. We can't have
they
that.
want to keep people alive and make sure folks are okay.
They're out there thinking that everybody's equal and deserves a shot at an enjoyable life.
I mean,
crazy.
When do we decide who deserves to die? I don't know what part of politics is that. That's great. Suede Vegas, thank you both so much for your time today.
Thanks for having us.
See you guys soon.
Yeah, really.